"You do know no one ever comes back from there, right?" The whispered voice echoed through the silent hallway, but HarperCollins didn't stop walking. Her heels tapped against the black marble like a countdown ticking toward detonation. Each step was a statement. Up ahead, the smoked glass door reflected the fear of those left behind, but she didn't flinch. 23 assistants in 2 years. "I'm not number 24, she thought, adjusting her blazer with trembling yet steady fingers. Behind the glass, a man's silhouette moved among screens and shadows. Damon Blackwell, the CEO no one dared look in the eye. The door slid open, and the impossible was about to begin. Vision Tech wasn't a company. It was a fortress made of concrete, glass, and silence. Originally built on the promise of reshaping the tech industry, it had become something else entirely. A place where emotion wasn't just unwelcome, it was exiled. Anyone walking its sterile halls could feel the temperature drop, even under the blazing California sun. It felt like walking through a spreadsheet, every inch calculated, every second optimized, with no room for error, delays, or humanity. At the top of this glacial empire sat one man, Damon Blackwell, CEO, founder. Architect of fear, master of control. They said he didn't sleep, that he'd trained his heart to beat in code, that he fired people for using the wrong font in an email. His presence was binary, obey or be deleted. No one looked him in the eye. And those who did? Well, no one remembers their names. The 47th floor was his tower. No personal items, no warmth, just screens pulsing with real-time data, graphs beating like artificial hearts, and folders labeled with surgical precision. At the center sat a glass desk, cold, spotless, reflecting nothing but void, and a photo frame always turned face down. A silent warning. The past was a mistake he'd never make again. Drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're listening from. We love hearing how far our stories reach. Damon lived by a simple philosophy. Feelings are bugs in the system of efficiency. He said it with the kind of chill only someone who'd burned out every last circuit in their heart could muster. After the betrayal that nearly destroyed his last company, he built Vision Tech like a fortress surrounded by emotional firewalls. Smiles became threats. Trust became a fatal flaw. Empathy, a programmed failure. It's not about people, it's about performance. That was his golden rule. No employee ever called him by his first name. Not even the oldest board members knew anything personal about him. His meetings lasted less than 10 minutes, just enough time to be vaporized with a single question: why should I listen to you? And now, standing at his door, a young woman walked in like she didn't even blink. Cheap blazer, sharp eyes, and a kind of determination that didn't belong in this world. Damon watched her through the cameras. "Another lamb to the slaughter," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. But something in the way she walked made him pause. She didn't look like she was there to beg. She looked ready to fight. Inside the company, whispers were already flying. She won't last a week. He'll crush her by Wednesday. But Harper hadn't come to last. She came to challenge. And in that cold empire, where fear ruled like an unbreakable algorithm, a tiny spark had been lit. And Damon, though he'd never admit it, felt the faintest flicker of heat. In the elevator, a nervous intern whispered, "Poor girl. She has no idea what she's walking into." But maybe no one there realized that the company itself was about to change. Because sometimes, all it takes for a system to crash is one unpredictable error, or, in this case, a fiercely determined woman. And in the soundproof silence of the 47th floor, Damon looked up. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to expect, but something inside him, something he thought he'd deleted long ago, whispered, "Careful. This one's not like the others." HarperCollins knew exactly what she was walking into. There were no illusions in her eyes the first time she stepped into Vision Tech's elevator, just the weight of a life that had trained her for every battle ahead. She was 26 and had already endured more loss than most people face in a lifetime. Orphaned at 16, raised in foster homes and public libraries, Harper had learned to read the world not by its rules, but by the lines no one ever taught. Her resume was spotless, but it didn't shine like the ones polished by privilege, the sons of CEOs and investment giants. What she had was rarer: deep listening, a thirst for justice, and a stubborn, unshakable drive to do what was right. To Harper, every achievement echoed a voice from her past, her foster mother's steady words. "No matter how hard the world gets, sweetheart, you don't have to get hard with it." Sitting in the waiting area on the 47th floor, Harper didn't bite her nails or check the time. She watched, the way employees avoided eye contact, the slight tremor in the secretary's hand as she poured coffee, the silence so heavy it swallowed any attempt at conversation. They're not afraid of the work, they're afraid of the boss. And that, to Harper, said everything. When she finally stepped into Damon Blackwell's office, the tension hit like a punch to the chest. The air was cold, heavy, almost clinical. He didn't look up right away, just twirled a pen slowly between his fingers, like he was deciding which button to push to eject her. "Name?" he asked, still not looking. "Harper Collins." "Resume?" "On your desk. Page 2, item 3. You already know I'm qualified. What do you really want to know?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, charged, surprise, irritation, and something else. Damon finally looked up. His eyes were steel. But for a split second, something flickered. She didn't blink. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, voice calm but unwavering, "I didn't come here to survive your test. I came to change it." The words landed like thunder. It was the first time in years someone had spoken to him without shaking. Damon leaned back in his chair. This woman was a glitch in the system, and he hated glitches. But for some reason, he couldn't look away. "You have no idea what you're walking into, Harper Collins." Her answer came with the quiet confidence of someone who'd survived real storms. "Maybe you don't either." It was like two tectonic plates had just collided, silently, irrevocably. As Harper left the room, she felt his eyes on her back. But it wasn't the intimidating stare people warned about. It was sharper, confused, curious. And she knew she hadn't won the war, but she'd just won the first battle. "He heard me. And in this place, that's an earthquake." Damon, meanwhile, remained still, staring at the chair she'd just occupied like she was still there. Something inside him stirred, something old, something he'd buried with his last company. "She didn't try to please me," he thought, almost dazed. "She tried to understand me." And deep within that barricaded heart, a crack had just begun to form. The next morning, Harper got her first challenge. Build a strategic report in 3 languages, cross-referencing data from 10 departments, due in 2 hours. No instructions. No time for questions. It was like being thrown into deep water with no life vest. But Harper didn't drown. She swam. She wrote by hand, typed, printed, and delivered. When Damon flipped through the pages and raised a brow, she said simply, "Page 7, updated comparison chart." But that was just the beginning. In less than a week, Damon forced her to attend 3 meetings at once, each on a different floor, testing her ability to delegate, prioritize, and improvise under pressure. She used double headsets, synced tablets, and even a hidden recorder. By the end of the day, she sent summaries of all 3 meetings, including insights that none of the executives had picked up. "Trying to impress me, Collins?" he asked. She smiled. "Nope, just trying to do better than expected." While Damon played his silent mind games, Harper was paying attention. The subtle tremor in his fingers when no one was watching. The way he avoided his own reflection in the elevator mirror. The untouched glass of whiskey on his desk at 8 p.m. every night. The signs were there, tucked behind layers of power and precision, and Harper, without saying a word, began piecing them together. She started staying late, not to compete, to observe, to understand the logic behind the chaos he created. One night she found him alone in the dark, staring at a string of outdated code on his screen. "Are you testing my endurance?" she asked gently, "or running from your own vulnerability?" The question hung in the air like smoke. He didn't answer. But he didn't ask her to leave either. People around the office began to notice something strange. For the first time in company history, the CEO hadn't fired his new assistant within the first 3 days. She smiled at the parking lot attendants, remembered the receptionist's names, offered coffee to the interns. And even when she was exhausted, she listened. Without realizing it, the entire company began to breathe differently. Damon, on the other hand, found himself watching the security cameras far too often, tracking Harper, rewatching conversations, repeating her words in his head. She doesn't try to look invincible, and maybe that's what makes her unstoppable. He'd never admit it, but Harper was infiltrating places no one had ever reached, even the ones inside him. One evening, she brought coffee for both of them. No fanfare, just placed the mug on his desk. "You've got good taste in spreadsheets," she teased, "but terrible taste in coffee." He didn't smile, but he didn't push it away either. He took a sip, stayed silent, then muttered, "You're not like the others." She met his eyes. "And you're not as impenetrable as you pretend to be." The rules of the game were changing. Damon threw challenges. Harper answered with presence, with empathy, with logic and heart, a combination he couldn't decode, and the more he tried to throw her off balance, the more he lost his own. She wasn't trying to beat him. She was trying to understand him. That night, as he reviewed a flawless report from her, he found a handwritten note attached, "Keep challenging me, but don't hide from yourself." And that's when Damon realized something terrifying. He wasn't in control anymore. Harper had started leaving invisible marks throughout the halls of Vision Tech. They weren't grand gestures, just details. A handwritten note congratulating the receptionist on 3 years at the company. A special coffee left on the desk of the night shift security guard. A bookmark with motivational quotes left in the women's restroom. No one knew who was behind it, but everyone knew. Something had changed. She organized a small surprise celebration for an overlooked employee in finance. Brought a cupcake, some makeshift balloons, and a smile bright enough to light up the greyest corners of the company. In the middle of the quiet little party, someone whispered, "This would have never happened before." And for the first time, laughter echoed on the 47th floor. Damon watched it all unfold through the security cameras, at first with irritation, then with curiosity. Who did she think she was, changing the entire mood of the company without permission? But the answer came clear as day, without her ever needing to speak. "I'm someone who believes kindness is a strategy too." She was redesigning Vision Tech's culture, one small act at a time. One day, Damon confronted her. "Do you even realize what you're doing?" She looked him straight in the eye. "I do. I'm reminding these people that they're still human." He pressed his lips together, unable to argue. Not because he lacked the words, but because, deep down, some part of him wondered if maybe she was right. That same week, Harper reorganized the executive calendar. Right in the middle of meetings and deadlines, she added time blocks labeled strategic breathing. Damon was furious. "What is this? Explain." "Breaks are productive too, sir, and your company needs to breathe." He scoffed, but didn't delete them. 3 days later, he was the one who asked to keep them. The unthinkable began to happen. Employees smiled at each other, people chatted in the elevators. An intern cracked a joke and didn't get fired. It was as if Harper had added color where only grayscale had existed, as if she were drawing windows into walls that had stood cold and solid for years. Damon found himself watching her in ways that had nothing to do with performance. He noticed how she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was focused, how her handwriting changed depending on her mood, how she listened, not just with her ears, but with her whole body. He hated losing control, but he was losing it, and strangely, he didn't want it back. One rainy evening, he caught her gathering wilted flowers from the front garden. "They're still alive," she said, with a soft smile, placing them into a vase of fresh water. They were just in the wrong place. Damon didn't respond, but that sentence echoed in his head for days. It felt like she was talking about him, without even knowing it. And for the first time, even if only to himself, he admitted, "You're not just changing this company, Harper. You're changing me." That night, the Vision Tech building slept, except for two lights still glowing on the top floor. Harper, exhausted, was finishing spreadsheets while rain tapped gently on the windows. As she stood to shut down the monitors, she noticed a faint light still coming from Damon's office. Curious, she paused at the half-open door. He was sitting alone, staring at a photograph. For the first time, the picture was facing up. It showed a young woman smiling softly, her eyes full of kindness. Damon didn't notice Harper watching him. There was something raw in his posture, something that made him look almost unrecognizable. No suit, no armor, just a man lost in memories that still hurt. When he finally noticed her, he didn't flinch. He just sighed and said softly, "She was my partner and my everything." Harper stepped in silently, honoring his pace. She sat down without asking, the kind of presence that offers comfort without expectation. "Did she betray you?" He nodded, eyes glassy. "She destroyed everything we built together, and she destroyed me with it." The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was spacious, a quiet place where wounds could breathe. "Since then," Damon continued, "I don't trust anyone. I don't allow myself to feel." He laughed, but without joy. "At Vision Tech, emotions are banned, because inside these walls, they're lethal." Harper looked at him, steady and unflinching. "It's not that you don't trust people, Damon. It's that you've convinced yourself caring is dangerous. You've built walls so high you forgot bridges exist." Her voice was soft, but her words sliced clean like a scalpel. He looked away, like someone afraid to bleed in front of a witness. "And what about you, Harper? Why do you still believe in people?" She took a deep breath, staring at the glowing city beyond the windows. "Because someone believed in me, back when I was worth nothing in the world's eyes. And that changed everything." They spent the night together, reviewing contracts and sharing silence. When Harper finally fell asleep on the office couch, completely drained, Damon covered her with his coat. A small gesture. But for someone who armored himself against the world, it was profoundly intimate. He watched her sleep like someone watching something fragile, something too precious to touch. The next morning he arrived earlier than usual. There was a lightness in his step, barely noticeable but real, a crack in the armor. People noticed, Harper noticed, but no one said a word, because everyone understood. Something much bigger than productivity had begun to bloom. And that night, alone again, Damon stood in the elevator, staring at his own reflection. For the first time, he didn't look away. "Harper, you made me remember who I was, before I became who I thought I had to be." It was supposed to be just another late night at work. Harper was digging through folders, preparing an urgent presentation, when she stumbled upon a misnamed file tucked deep inside an isolated server partition. Curious, she opened it. What she found was disturbing. Project Pandora, a top-secret algorithm designed to collect users' private data without consent. Her heart stopped for a beat. The implications were massive, illegal, immoral. With every line of code she read, the ground seemed to vanish beneath her feet. Damon didn't just know about it, he'd designed it. There were emails, meeting notes, profit projections based on data manipulation. She tried to breathe, tried not to believe it, but the evidence was right there, cold, undeniable. The man she was beginning to love, the one who seemed to be rebuilding himself, was behind one of the worst ethical breaches she'd ever seen. The next morning, she walked straight into his office. No knock. Damon was staring out the window, like always. "You knew all along," she said. Her voice was low, steady, not angry, just shattered. He turned to face her slowly. "You don't understand what's at stake." But Harper already understood. "I understand that you chose to betray millions for profit. And worse, you did it in silence, like it was normal." Damon tried to explain, but every word sounded like an excuse. "In the business world, Harper, ethics are a luxury the weak can't afford." It felt like he had slapped her. "You just proved everything I saw in you was a lie." He reached out, as if he could stop the truth from slipping through his fingers. But it was already gone. "I thought you were different, Damon. I thought we were different." Her eyes shimmered with tears, but none of them fell. "You made me believe the impossible was possible. But in the end, you just dressed your pain in a more expensive suit." Damon didn't try to stop her. He knew any defense would ring hollow, and she knew, from now on, there was no more us. Harper walked out of that office like someone leaving a burning building. Inside, everything was on fire. The love that had begun to grow, the admiration. The quiet plans she hadn't dared to name, all gone. The halls of Vision Tech were cold again, but now the cold came from within. She didn't cry. Not yet. The pain was too big for tears. Damon stood motionless for hours. He didn't call anyone, didn't touch a thing. Just stood there, alone, replaying every moment, every word, every time she'd made him feel something outside his precious control. And then he understood. It wasn't Harper who betrayed him. It was him, betraying the best part of himself. And now, there was no one left to blame. That night, Harper wandered the city, past strangers living their lives, unaware of the storm she carried on her shoulders. She sat on a bench in the middle of a quiet plaza and whispered, "Integrity isn't what you do when people are watching. It's what you can't not do, even when no one sees." And there, caught between heartbreak and conviction, she knew she had no choice left. She would have to bring down the empire, to save the last human part of herself. For days, Harper drifted through the company like a ghost. She moved as if she'd already left, but no one noticed. Except Damon. He watched her from a distance, silent. The words she'd spoken still echoed between them, opening wounds that wouldn't close. But Harper's silence wasn't from heartbreak, it was focus. She was gathering strength, preparing to do the unthinkable. In her tiny apartment, she spread out documents, screenshots, email logs, evidence. She called old contacts from college, investigative journalists, trusted lawyers. "Do you realize what this could set off?" one of them asked. She nodded, eyes tired but firm. "I do. But keeping this quiet would destroy something even bigger. My conscience." That night, Harper stood on the city's tallest bridge, not to jump, but to feel the wind, the weight, the courage. She closed her eyes and remembered her foster mother's voice. "You'll never be like the others, sweetheart, because you feel too much. And that's your power." For the first time in days, she cried. Softly, silently, and it set her free. Back at home, she dialed the number of an investigative newsroom. Every digit felt like a punch to the chest. When the call connected, her voice came out calm, almost cold. "I have a report. Project Pandora. Vision Tech." Silence on the other end. Then came the words that sealed it all. "We're listening." Meanwhile, Damon watched the silent collapse of everything he'd built. The air at Vision Tech was heavy. like something was about to detonate. He noticed the hushed voices, the tension, the sideways glances, but what hurt most was the silence in the room next to his. Harper's laughter was gone, and with it, the last shred of hope in his frozen world. The next day, she didn't show up, nor the day after, nor the one after that. 3 days later, the story broke, headlines everywhere. Vision Tech's secret algorithm exposes millions. Investigations, protests, lawsuits. Harper's name was never mentioned, but Damon knew. He knew. And the pain wasn't for the company. It was for losing her. Alone in his office, he stared at the whiteboard, at the sentence she'd written days before. Some battles you lose to win the war against yourself. And he understood. She hadn't wanted to destroy him. She had tried to save him. But he'd taken too long to listen. Back in her small apartment, Harper sat with her heart in pieces. And yet, somehow, at peace. She had lost a love that had barely begun. But she had found herself. In the stillness of the night, she held a necklace that once belonged to her mother and whispered, "I did the right thing, even if it hurt." Dum, and at that very moment, without knowing, Damon was staring at the sky, wondering, will she ever forgive me? The exposé spread like wildfire across the world. Vision Tech CEO involved in illegal data mining scheme, the headlines screamed on every screen. The company that once symbolized perfection and performance had now become the face of scandal, betrayal, and violation. Investors bailed, stocks plummeted. In just days, Vision Tech was no longer an empire. It was a house of cards collapsing before the eyes of the world. Everyone expected Damon to respond with fury, with lawsuits, with denial. But what he did, no one saw coming. At a sudden press conference, he appeared in front of the cameras. No suit, no sparkle in his eyes, no armor. He looked older, more human, his once razor-sharp voice now barely a whisper. "Yes," he said, "everything reported is true, and I take full responsibility." Reporters were stunned, but Damon didn't look away from the lenses. He spoke like a man who finally understood the damage, not just to the market, but to people, to himself. "HarperCollins showed me there's something more important than success. Dignity." He paused, swallowed hard. "And sometimes, the only way to find yourself again is to lose everything first." The next morning, he vanished from public life. He cancelled all interviews, returned his awards, resigned as CEO. No one knew where he went. Only one thing reached Harper, a handwritten note delivered by an intern with no return address. It was short. "You didn't destroy me. You saved me. D." She held the paper to her chest and felt the tears fall. Not of grief, but of silent forgiveness. In the months that followed, Harper used her settlement to launch a small consultancy. She named it Visions, a quiet contrast to everything Vision Tech had stood for. It was a modest space, but full of soul. A place where ethics, innovation, and humanity could coexist. And without seeking attention, the new firm began attracting people and purpose. She declined interview requests, never mentioned her role in the scandal. She wasn't looking for fame. She was building impact. She wanted to be a bridge, not a wall. She wanted to prove that it was still possible to build something real in a world addicted to results at any cost. And with each contract signed on trust, she felt she wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was redefining what the world could be. Damon, meanwhile, disappeared into silence. He traveled far, alone, no security, no luxury. He slept in cabins, walked forest trails, filled pages with journal entries. He tried, slowly, painfully, to find himself again, far from the mirrors that had once distorted who he was. And every day, one face returned to him. Harper's, strong, gentle, telling him, "You're not as impenetrable as you pretend to be. When he looked at his reflection in the river, he no longer saw a CEO. He saw a man, stripped bare, a man who finally wanted to learn how to love more than he wanted to control. And though Harper didn't know it, she had planted the seed of a new empire, not made of steel, but of truth. The auditorium was packed. Cameras, journalists, investors. It was the official launch of Visions, Harper's new company, built on ethics, inclusion, and innovation. She stepped onto the stage in a simple but striking dress, her eyes glowing with conviction. "Today," she said, "we begin a quiet revolution, one where people come before the algorithm." The audience erupted in applause, but Harper barely noticed. Her heart was elsewhere, in the very back row, half shrouded in shadow. He was there, Damon Blackwell, thinner, bearded, hair tousled. But his eyes, they were different. No longer cold, but humble. He clutched a letter in his hands, his fingers trembling. When Harper stepped off the stage, he began to walk toward her. Each step felt like the entire past moving toward her. "Harper," he said, voice shaking, "I've spent 6 months learning how to become the man you once saw in me, not the monster I became." The crowd hushed. The world held its breath. "You taught me that to lead isn't to dominate. It's to serve. That true strength is having the courage to feel, and love is when you choose someone, even when it hurts." She didn't answer, just looked at him. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in his life, he bowed his head to someone. "I came to say I'm sorry for every word I used as a weapon, for every silence that cut you, and to tell you I've loved you since the day you told me no." The silence turned electric. Everyone waited. Harper didn't move right away. She took a breath, remembered the sleepless nights, the pain that still lived inside her. Then, with the same unshakable strength as always, she stepped forward. Her eyes met his. "You didn't need a new company, Damon. You needed a new heart." He dropped the letter. She pulled him into an embrace, and for a moment the world around them disappeared. They weren't a CEO and a former assistant. They were two broken souls, healed, rebuilt, and together, starting not a new chapter, but a new story. A story where love didn't rescue, it inspired. At the end of the ceremony, they stood alone on the empty stage. Damon turned to her, eyes glassy. "Do you think we can fix this?" Harper smiled. No hesitation. "We're not fixing it. We're reinventing it." The new beginning didn't arrive with fireworks. It came in silence, with simple choices, small sacrifices, and profound lessons. Damon didn't return as CEO. He came back as a team member, someone who sat beside others, who listened instead of commanding. He asked to be treated like everyone else, and Harper, steady and grounded, agreed. "If we're building something new, we start from the same place, the ground." Visions grew slowly, but its roots ran deep. Clients didn't come for flash, they came for trust. Companies wanted to learn from her. People wanted to work there for a reason bigger than titles. And Damon, for the first time, realized he didn't need to be on top to matter. He just needed to be whole. Harper led teams with the same empathy she used to hear the silence behind someone's eyes. She turned meetings into listening circles, goals into human journeys. Damon, now more observer than executor, studied every move she made, as if listening to a song he'd never heard before. At the end of each day, he knew. She didn't save him. She inspired him to save himself. They began walking to work together, sometimes in silence, sometimes tossing ideas back and forth, sometimes just laughing at life's absurdity. Their connection had shifted, no longer tension but harmony, like two instruments making something together that no one else would quite understand, but that made perfect sense to them. One afternoon, an investor asked why Damon hadn't returned to the leadership seat. He smiled and pointed to Harper. "Because leadership is already in the best hands." The answer spread through the halls, not as gossip but as proof of transformation, and in Harper's eyes, for the first time, there was peace. Damon began writing again. Internal memos, articles about conscious leadership, open letters about his past mistakes. He shared everything with raw honesty. He wasn't seeking redemption, he was seeking to serve, and the more open he became, the more people leaned in, because real remorse has power. Harper, in turn, was invited to give talks, mentor others, speak at global forums. She never chased the spotlight, but her story struck deep, not because it was about scandal or success, but because it was about integrity, and the world was starving for that. One evening, while they were setting up a room for an event, Damon wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You know I'm not perfect, right?" Harper turned to him with a quiet smile. "I'm not interested in perfect. I'm interested in real." And in that moment, they both knew they had nothing left to prove. They looked at each other as if to say, "We didn't fix each other, Damon. We became whole, together." 2 years passed since that day in the auditorium. Visions now occupied 3 floors in a Silicon Valley innovation center, but what had truly grown was invisible. Culture, consciousness, care. In the same hallway where Harper once walked alone toward the career graveyard, she now walked hand in hand with Damon, not as a subordinate, but as an equal. The once cold glass walls now held photos of social projects, notes of gratitude, plants tended by employees, and where silence once reigned out of fear, now lived music, laughter, and freedom. Harper looked around and whispered, "Do you feel that?" Damon nodded. "It's not power, it's purpose." Through the same window that once framed only ambition, they now saw possibility. Young talent, mothers with babies in their arms, neurodivergent creators, real stories building something spreadsheets could never capture. And Damon, eyes filled with tears, confessed, "For so long I thought I needed an empire, but all I ever needed was to feel again." They sat down to review the next quarter's plans. Harper took his hand and asked, "Do you remember what I told you that first day?" He smiled. "That you didn't come here to survive my test." She nodded, voice breaking just a little. "But to change it." He squeezed her hand. "You didn't just change my test, Harper. You changed my whole life." Later that day, there was a quiet ceremony, not for awards, but to introduce a new company initiative, the Heart Project, offering free mental health support to every employee. When Harper took the mic, her words didn't come rehearsed. They came from the soul. "The world taught us to lead with strength, but no one taught us to lead with empathy. Today, we choose to change that." At the end of the day, as they passed the same elevator mirror Damon had avoided for years, he paused, looked at his reflection, and for the first time, he smiled. "You gave me a new heart, Harper." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "No, you just finally listened to what it was saying." Before they left, Harper picked up a marker and wrote a single sentence on the lobby wall, a line that carried their entire journey. Some stories end with happily ever after, but this one ends with brave forever. Drop a comment below if you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to subscribe for more like this, and we'll see you in the next video, because sometimes all the world needs is someone brave enough to say no and still choose to love anyway.